Oh, nothing.
And actually, eclipses serve to remove things from your life that just simply aren't relevant anymore. But sometimes we've grown so accustomed to a certain direction, a certain identity, that we fear, we clench. And in that state of tension, we become more on the victim side of the potentiality than we do on the side of being empowered by these massive forces of change. And that is the difference between the cross of planning and the sleeping phoenix, is that we're here to be empowered in our individual intuition and spiritual guidance. Those of us that are going to thrive in the age of the sleeping phoenix, whether we carry that cross in our design or pieces of it, are those of us that will not fall to the victim mentality of being paralyzed by fear. We have to be able to keep it moving when things are chaotic, when things are uncertain, when things are difficult or unexpected. And that's definitely par for the course with what we're seeing here. So tapping into your individual strategy and authority and understanding that the receptivity of your nine-centered beingness has all the codes, all the navigation it needs, the connection it needs to moving through these experiences with curiosity, with awareness, with in the spirit of cooperation. Because even though we're moving to an extremely individual time, the tribe and what that means for us as human beings sharing the struggles of survival together will still very much be a part of the picture. So our first eclipse here, our Scorpio solar eclipse, is all about preparation. And we'll take a look at the individual keynotes here. Obviously, as a solar eclipse, this is a partial solar eclipse, so it's not directly on the nodes themselves, but it's very close.
And it's a south southern, with the south node eclipse, which as an astrologer, the north node ones are definitely more potent, I would say. I know that people can kind of get lost in the south node, and sometimes I'm not going to say that they're not as impactful, but there is a slightly softer tone on the south node eclipse.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me intuitively. It's more about being able to really get real with yourself down to the foundations of what the meaning of your life is. And that's not necessarily conceptual. It's not necessarily having a vision of what your life's meaning is. It's about feeling it in your gut. It's about feeling it in your bones. It's in the spleen. It's intuitive. It's instinctual. What navigation move can you make in preparation for a more meaningful life? The spleen wants us to survive and thrive and be healthy and to take our well-being into our own hands through action. And in this case, with Gate 28, line 1, through preparation. So getting down to the nitty-gritty, the brass tacks, the actual details of what that means for you on a survival level. And when I say survival level, I don't mean, oh my God, you're going to die, or that there's a huge risk that you're going to die. I'm not saying that. I'm not predicting that. But that's what the spleen is about. That's what the center is about. And so that's what the theme is going to be about. And when we see the actual keynote here from the I Ching, preponderance of the great, the transitoriness of power and influence, the gate of risk-taking. Only by tapping into your vitality and the reserves of the place where your spirit meets your body, and they work together as one through your intuitive response, do you feel the power that you truly have. When you're living a relaxing life, you don't feel your power in this sense. So it sometimes takes a stimulating event on an external level to really call forth your full potential. And that's what this is all about. Now, as a detriment, because Venus is also here in line 1, to me, Venus brings flow and ease. So without judging based purely on the detriment reading here, which says the aesthetic appreciation of planning that may have no real application, an intuition for detail without the potential for application. This is the most lowest common denominator expression of what this energy could be. If you really break it down to the line in the gate, line 1 is about getting all the details right. Gate 28 is about taking risks. Venus is about there being an ease or a flow or just a natural receptivity to attaining what these details are or what these preparations can be. If you're coming from the not self though, because keep in mind all of these keynotes that we have as like the canon human design, readings basically are for the not self. They're the most basic rendition of these energies. They're not the highest form by any means. So yeah, if you're in the not self, if you're not connected to your strategy and authority, this is what you can expect. Having a lot of awareness perhaps of what you could be doing, but not applying it. And that's really where we're seeing the division and where everyone's going. Are you taking action? Are you being the empowered survival being? Because as we move into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, it's about individual survival. The whole planet will have channel 3420 as a background frequency, which is charisma, which is taking action when you feel it in your gut. And that's all that this is asking you. And it's also saying that the nodes themselves, these intergalactic forces of evolutionary change, are providing a portal for you to take a risk, to be in your highest vitality, your greatest preparation for what's to come, and to really feel like your blood pumping, to truly feel alive, to truly feel empowered, and that your life means something, that it's not just the repetitive humdrum, go to work every day. There are times for that. Stability is important. This is a different time. This is about risks. So in terms of the actual, because when we look at a transit, we're more focusing on the personality side.
So just to go into that risk for a second, it's like, do you feel that it's much more of a risk on a personal level than it is the external kind of world level?
Yeah, because as a first line theme, lines 1, 2, and 3 are about your personal destiny. They're about establishing your identity in some way. New moon, solar eclipse, the reestablishment of the identity through the intuitive navigation of what risks are worth taking.
Does that also mean because it's got that first line color, which is a theme of survival too, that it would be kind of taking the risk to keep going?
Yeah, the first line is actually motivated by fear. So we think so poorly of fear, but fear is the root of all intelligence. It's what gets you to take action when you need to take action. So if we're sleepy and, droopy and all these like lethargic aspects of what we can be, then that fear doesn't really catalyze the kind of, heightened state that it's meant to. But, when you embrace the fear, not as a paralyzing influence, but as a motivating influence, it's quite powerful in transforming and turning the tide in your favor.
It's also interesting because when this eclipse does happen, like we're doing this right now in September, in the middle of September of 2022, but by the time that it hits in the late October of 2022, a bunch of planets are finally direct. Like we're in 6 planets retrograde right now, which is already rare. It's very rare. Mm-hmm. And by the time that eclipse comes, Pluto's direct, Saturn's direct, Mercury's already out of its retrograde. We're going to see Jupiter, start being like, hey, I'm coming back into Pisces, everyone. And then we're getting ready for, in between these two eclipses, a Mars retrograde. Ugh. That hasn't happened in Gemini completely since 1943 into 44. So, which is kind of weird, but it's not to me. It kind of reminds me of sorrow cycles of eclipses. Like this Mars retrograde's actually happening, at the end of a year, the same way it did last time in 43, that we could actually see it be through all of Gemini. So it's really interesting to me, like that there is, when you bring up the sleepiness, it reminds me of the 6 planets retrograde, and it kind of like, it's, and then just this huge, like, boom, So there is the preparation that definitely you, even in the sleepiness, you still want to be preparing yourself and not just kind of falling asleep at the wheel and thinking, oh, I'll get up in 20 seconds and everything will be all right. Like you could fall asleep and go off the rails in many ways. Like you don't want to take maybe that risk.
Yeah.
But you might want to take the risk of, well, maybe I'll pull over for a second and I'll take the 5-minute nap, but I better have an alarm set, or I don't know. It's kind of it's a little bit dicey. I feel like you make people get caught off guard, I think, because the energies are switching so extreme so much that we've been covering, that this is going to be another kind of odd thing that's coming up in our lives. We've already seen the North Node Uranus that we covered.
Yeah.
And seeing how that really, we said during that show, that this is the turn of that new cross beginning, that you'll never feel the same after that moment. But this is like really initiating, I think, so much of what's to come. And I know we've been marking a lot of precursors and kind of a way to gauge what's coming.
Yeah.
But I feel like because these are eclipses, and that whole idea of planning and moving to the sleeping phoenix, it's the great risk to get out of planning that will be good for you. So it does kind of remind me of the risk of like taking the red pill in the Matrix, or right, like that's the risk that I feel like is the big one of like, don't, like you said earlier, like you can't just be just in your mundane kind of la da da kind of doing the work life. Like this is where it's like, no, we're not meant to live this way. And that frequency, as we described, it's dying. It's literally dying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you can see the party's ending. Like, do you decide to get going and get yourself ready for your next day of your life? Or do you stay and just keep drinking until you black out, and then you just wake up face down on the lawn the next day and you don't know who you are, where you're going.
Your phone's lost.
Yeah. It's in the pool. And so that's an interesting like differentiation to make, that it's not about this homogenized view of what preparation means. You know, there's all these ways that we immediately go to thinking of like, oh, how can I prepare? I need like 11 cans of beans and 25,000 pieces of toilet paper and like all this stuff. Everybody's preparations is going to be unique to them. You know, what you're guided to do in relationship to this eclipse cycle is not supposed to be looking out there. It's a first line theme. It's introspective by nature. In the not self, it's about asking everybody else what they're doing, which can be part of the research and development of your strategy, but it's not about copying. It's not about emulating. It's about knowing that your guidance is coming from within. That's the whole point here. That is the human design ethos and the logos, where a personal inner authority is your guiding light through whatever is coming, whether it's a gentle vacation or an extreme apocalypse, which is just an unveiling, you know?
I mean, yeah, I was going to say, it's really, I know this might sound really fucking out there, but I've never understood for hemorrhoids preparation H, because you already got the hemorrhoid. You weren't prepared. So like, I guess preparation H is meant to like buy it and be prepared for when a hemorrhoid comes. What kind of reminds me of how you said storable food or something like that.
Right.
But it's kind of not sold that way. It's kind of like, oh, you've got a hemorrhoid? Come buy at the store and get the cooling gel. But there's signs of strain. There's signs of, you know, you can feel inside, like you say, like, especially I think men have a lot more hemorrhoids than women, but women have them too. But it's one of those things where it's kind of like, yeah, I haven't been eating really good, right? I've been pushing way too hard. And then that's what happens. It's stress. It's like trying to force things, you know? And then it's like, I don't even know why they call it preparation H, though. It makes no sense to me. Like, that's just a weird name for a company and for a product. And it's like, it kind of reminds me of these times. People are like, well, you know, I'm prepared. I've got my tube of preparation in life for this. and kind of like expecting, again, like in the cross of planning, as if there's a product or there'll be this certainty when we don't know what it is. Like you said, it's going to be different for everybody else. Like if you get a hemorrhoid, it won't maybe be preparation H. Like it might be an aloe leaf, or it could be just a nice bath for a week because of water. That's all you've got with you wherever you're at. I don't know, but it kind of is like letting go of the product, letting go of this idea that this is the solution when you're not even there to know the solution, because that's the whole idea that has never made sense to me about preparation H. It's like, why do you call it that? Like, you're not prepared when you're buying it after you got a hemorrhoid. I guess it's to be prepared to go out for dinner so you feel better, but that still doesn't make sense to me. So it's like, I think the preparation that you're talking about is a lot more true to the term, because I feel like it's a term of where it's an internal knowing of what's going on. It's an internal, gauge as well, but also not being so caught up on the exact, like, when it happens, I'm doing this. Because in the cross of planning, it's like the idea, like, if it went down, I'd be on the roof, I'd have a rifle, I'd have this, I'd have that. You don't know how it's going to go down in the moment.
Mm-hmm. That's your strategic mind, which is something we were meant to leave behind in 1781, if not before that. So it's like even those notions of preparation can be a block to seeing the actual, let's say, divine path that's laid out for you by your higher self in the G center. And it's about knowing that your body is designed to move through anything that comes in this time without the struggle of survival. So it's not just, being ready for something. It's actually knowing that there's a part of you that knows how to navigate this and circumnavigate it completely. Like to actually know before you know, but where you're not supposed to be or where you are supposed to be. That there's this inner pull from the magnetic monopole that is literally pulling you in the direction of your destiny. And that's a very lofty term, but the coordinates where you're most safe and you have the greatest chance of continuing your life's work.
Yeah, and I think it goes well with human design, where if you're not getting a yes or no, then it's still a no. Like, I feel like, we can go round and round robin right now with all these retrogrades and preparing for these eclipses and start going into these, oh God, like I need to prepare. Should I do this? And it's like, if you're not feeling the yes for the invitation, or you're not feeling the yes for the full gut response or the emotional wave response, it's kind of like, then that's not what it is, like, and I think people can get lost in their minds doing a bouncing back and forth of like, gosh, am I going to miss out if I don't do this? Or it's like, if you're even saying that, unless I think it's a good question for you about human design. Like, I guess because we're both MGs and sacral MGs and pure MGs, that it's like, I've never in my life had anything be really satisfying that I was like, should I, like kind of that little bounce around thing. Mm-hmm. It's never fully satisfied.
Yeah.
It's never.
For me, it's more of that like locking on, like that's it. It's a very, sharp feeling almost going into it. It's like it strikes you. It like hits you in the G center. Like, yes, that's
synchronistic
it.
Too, right? If it's very like you can just see all the pieces just start. Oh yeah, that's a direct. It's like you were mentioning earlier, because you have angels in your color that actually kind of guide you through things in life. But and you said it's kind of like in Mario Kart when you get pulled off the track and back on. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's where you see in life where it's just like everything's pulling you right into the place that you're supposed to be. There's no other thing.
And then the thing that our mind does is it constantly wants to change what's actually happening. So it will always like jump out of that passenger seat that it's meant to be in and question and think of how it could be better. or how we miss something, or how it could go wrong. And then that pulls us out of our flow state, and it also makes us think that we have to do more than we actually need to do to stay in the flow. And the flow is where you're finding everything that you need in the proportions that you need it. And it's just about letting the mind go back into its passenger seat and to be the objective witness of what the mind is even thinking about. You know, this is the most powerful survival skill I think we have in this world today. And the format that our consciousness is in right now is being able to see past the deception of the mind, which is so insecure. It's always seeking certainty. It's always looking for threats. It's still running the seven-centered program, which makes us...
Right. A little Cro-Magnon-ish mixed with like a little bit of, I guess you could say, an egocentric idea that we are more powerful through the mind, and well the control center of the mind through the ego. The ego and the mind are actually extremely connected, 100%. But the ego uses the mind to say, I'm doing the right thing. This is the right thing. This is not the right thing. It's not paying attention to the feeling or the spirit at all.
I mean, even like looking at the heart center or the ego center in a body graph, the ego is about caring for the tribe. It's about love, it's about affection, and it's about getting what we need to maintain, you know, the good things in life. That's why it's the hub of the material world, because in this format, in this system, money is that medium of exchange that allows us to get what we need for our ascension on a material level, for moving up through the ranks of life to feel good and to feel supported and to feel like we're going to survive. So the ego is meant to be in service to the tribe. It's not meant to be this unruly, you know, bratty little thing that is bullying us on the inside and threatened and insecure about other people on the outside and just trying to find any other little avenue to get its power or its validation from the world around it. It's more of a caring, loving force. And so all these people running around, 65% of the population who don't have defined ego energy, who are pretending and puppeting like they have all this, you know, power and ego, is like misuse of power.
Well, it was weird because today before you came here and I was eating lunch, a video from Ram Dass's foundation popped up. They just put it up today and I thought it was really crazy. And it was Terence McKenna, and they were in Prague speaking and had a great convo. And the convo was, do you think that, this is what Terence McKenna asked Ram Dass, do you think that psychedelics are necessary for the humanity to make it through the next wave, which to them was the 21st century, right? And Ram Dass took some time and he went, well, one is we're in a world of minds where everybody is, there's so many different minds, and then there's even minds that look at everything differently. And he said, you know, I don't think we're going to need everybody to have psychedelics to go to the boundless space to break the ego mind to really see things differently, because at that time, and this was like in the late 80s, he was down in the rainforest and they already had told him like, hey, there's no saving the rainforest. It's going to go. Like the way everything is, it's going to go. But the one thing that Ram Dass says is it's the mind that can't see that there's a miracle that could happen. And the only thing that could save the rainforest, or even if we think save whatever our ego mind is doing, is the one thing that the mind can't figure out, is the miracle of how we're all here, or why these cycles are here, how all this stuff happens. And I just thought it was interesting because it's like the mind can never figure out things. Even when you try to save the world, you can't. Like there's going to be the miracle of how things are going to happen in a weird way. And I think the miracles that happen in our life is when we respond and use our authority and strategy correctly. That we can never see the miracle until we show up to the miracle when it shows up to us to respond to. There's no other way to figure it out.
Yeah, because it's really just the process of getting out of our own way. To put it in a cheesy slogan, basically, it's just being humble enough to realize that you're not in control here. No one is. None of these even global powers are in control. They're all extensions of the program of one continuous consciousness. And this story that we're living is the movie that we're here to live through to rediscover who and what we really are, which is we're all different expressions and fragments of the totality, filtering consciousness in unique and different ways. If you're just stuck in your mind, you're literally thinking thoughts that have been thought over and over and over and over again since the beginning of the debut of humanity. These are not original thoughts. They have nothing to do with the future. They have nothing to do with you.
But and there's almost 8 billion other minds with all those millions and billions of thoughts that now are intersecting with your own.
60,000 thoughts a day per person.
So, but if you think of the media, you think of your cell phone, you think of social media, right? That we've never dealt with this much thinking in the mind. I thought Terence McKenna's answer was interesting and beautiful because he was just saying like, well, you know, it's like he was an ordinary guy and psychedelics just found him. Mm-hmm. That was his miracle. And his whole thing was, for him, he was very about psychedelics. So he was like, well, what if I gave 12 people psychedelics of ordinary people? They'd become extraordinary, right? But Ram Dass went back and went, that's not the case. That's what I did with Timothy Leary, and everybody reacts differently, mm-hmm. right? So there is no solution, like there is no pill, everybody's not going to react to psychedelics the same way. Not everybody's going to react to everything the same way. That's what makes us all unique. So there is no one size fits all, like externalized physical thing here. And I think that people can get caught up in the mind of always the physical and the reality, or, you know, especially in the spiritual community, you hear so much about like, oh God, I'm microdosing right now. It's changing my life and all that. And then you could do that for somebody else, and holy boy, that could put them on the like worst track, especially if they're not feeling a gut response, or they got invited to it and they're like they have no understanding. They've never researched it. They never spent the time to understand the repercussions from it, and go in the wrong direction, you know? So it's like one of those things to where I get what Terence McKenna says, but I feel like that's where they were at then, mm-hmm. and we're at people who are awake, whether you would use psychedelics or not. It's the spiritual energy that you feel like, whoa, I've gone to a boundless space outside of my mind and are starting to see things from the spirit. And it's like, that's the beauty of it, is when you can break out of that mind, because it's ego-centered mind. It really is. Mm-hmm. And it's a false concept of who you are and how you can do things and what's going to even happen to you, because it's not happening to you.
Right. It's like what we were talking about on the panel for the full moon event, how, you know, you can be thinking a million different storylines about, you know, what your partner's doing when they're not with you. And those things can call full on emotional, you know, chemical cascades through the body that give you the full simulated experience of the fact that they might be cheating on you. And then it's not even real.
Right.
And you just used your super advanced mutating emotional system against yourself because you were stuck in the need for ego validation. And it's like, yeah, we're being asked at this time to make a cognitive leap as a species. That's what human design is about. That's what these last 5 years of the cross of planning are about. That's what the raves will do exponentially better than we are even capable of doing. But that's why it's so important to honor the beauty and even the limitation of where we stand now, that you're not everything everywhere all at once, like that movie. You're just a simple, loving, guided human being. And you don't have to figure everything out in order to be worthy of your next breath. And your best bet at being one of evolution's favorite individuals is by humbling that ego self that has constant need to control and strive and struggle and think that it's the only driver of activity and manifestation, and to realize that when you kneel, when you bow to creation, you're handed the keys to a life that is beyond your mind's conscious capacity to even imagine. And the more people that are living in that vibration, that is a natural byproduct of that kind of lifestyle, that kind of direction, the more the world becomes the miraculous place that we hope it to be, as opposed to the frustrated, self-destructing place that we fear it to be. I saw a great quote on somebody's Instagram the other day, and it was like, you act like mortals in all that you fear, but immortals in all you desire. And it was just like, yep,
Right.
That's it. That's the ego in a nutshell.
One, I like that you bring up, because this is a Scorpio solar eclipse that we're going to start with. It's really interesting to me because it's Scorpio, where you brought up like people worried about their partner cheating on them, right? That's not in your sphere of your aura at the moment at all.
Right.
And then when you think of Scorpio, and it comes with those darker shades of the emotional waves of fear, of death, anxiety, of jealousy, of rage, of over intense desire, of possessive energies, where this is definitely not going to be, especially that we're in a south node in Scorpio. We are coming into big Scorpio energies in the middle where this is just getting crazy, right? That this is not the time, because of what it's about is trust. What you're really talking about is when you trust creation over your own mind, and you trust that creation will show up to you perfectly,
Because it's
then
always
you're going to
about-
be fine. But you're right. You can totally screw yourself, which people say in the community now, you manifested it. But I like how you say it's more of how you can turn your own mutation against you. It reminds me of de-evolution, like evolving backwards, right? Like people think manifestation's like a magic trick, like that you just, I manifested it, like as if I pulled a rabbit out of a hat. Right? Like that's the problem with the manifesting
That's
community.
pride. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also become this whole thing. Like that's why I did a whole school on manifesting. I showed people it's not that. You're not everybody's here to have a Ferrari, and that might be the worst manifesting life of your life. You know what I mean? And that was what my whole school was. And I used the trickery of like getting people to think that's what my whole school was, of like, look at how I got this or whatever. And I said, this ain't what it is. And like, it was an interesting thing, but I feel that that's what it is. It's trust to this, allowing the miracle itself, but it's creation. It's the holiest of highest divine powers that are here to serve us.
Yeah.
It's like almost like refusing the most amazing service from God when I've got to figure it out. And we start going into freak out mode, because Scorpio also is death anxiety. So the fear of, it goes deeper than, is my partner cheating? It's more of, I don't have enough trust that it will just be okay, that it will go where it's supposed to go.
Just squeezing into this little, you're squeezing yourself into this tiny little not divine being. And that's interesting, because gate 28, where this new moon is going to be, is because it's in the spleen. Spleen is the center of fears. It is the fear of death. That is what gate 28. Fear that you'll die without making a meaningful impact in this world. Fear that you'll die without having that ecstatic moment that defines you as a person in your life. Fear that you'll die and just be like a
Regrets,
housefly.
basically.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you talk about that this is about this risk, right? Is it a risk for trusting this beautiful process of creation? No. I think the great risk in life is when you realize that you can take the worst risk of your life if you don't trust. But it might feel like it's a risk to trust in a moment when it doesn't feel like it's going to be able to. Right? It's like, it feels more like a risk than it really is. Whenever we have that trust of, is it going to be okay? Or am I going to, is it all, because Scorpio is that transformational element, but it also is that where things, to go through transformation, you have to look through the eye of the needle of a black hole. And you know what? It's the more that you surrender to that black hole and see what's on the other side of it, doesn't mean that everything's not coming with you. If it's a black hole, it takes everything with it. So the idea that the separation too of like, that one might come with me, you don't know. Like there is like, I think where there's too much overemphasis in where we're at right now astrologically, and even where we're at with this cross of planning, that it's every plan that we have been set up with for so long in our minds, right? Like, well, this has to come with me, and that has to be in this alignment with me, and this has to be here, and if this isn't this way, and this isn't that way, and this isn't, it's become like the biggest house of cards that we have ever created in our human existence, with 8 billion people adding to the cards and adding their own house of cards. It reminds me of Jenga, and Elon Musk found a way to just keep putting the Jenga up as far as he could into space, and going, no, it's all gonna, there's never gonna be a moment. You can keep pulling little Jengas here, it won't fall. But it's like the big laugh is like, this is gonna be the best movie to watch, the whole thing fall and laugh at, because I think that when people get too caught up in watching the understandings in their own way of projecting it, it's like, oh my God, I won't be able to get eyelashes at CVS and be able to glue them on my eyes. Right? Like, or, oh my God, I won't be able to get this or get that in this whole system of planning. Where I think if you look at it like a big house of cards or a big Jenga that's just like gone too infinite and too big and too tall, or even like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, how's that thing still up? It's one of those things where it's like, we're already at the Leaning Tower of Gaia at the moment, where Gaia's wanting it to fall to reset the vibration to the new frequency. And it's not even Gaia's own ego that even is coming up with the idea of resetting. It's responding to the frequencies that are changing things and just doing as the order of the natural universe is doing. It's not like Gaia's like has an ego and Gaia's like, I can't stand all these human here. That's what they project onto all of us, right? With climate change and all these things right now. The fears as if the earth isn't happy. But it's more like the earth is just naturally going with wherever the frequencies that are changing are coming in, just like us. And I think earth is the best example of following the divine strategy and authority, because I'm not one that, maybe because you said that my guide is aliens. I only hear these aliens above. I don't know. But Gaia, I don't hear Gaia complaining. I always hear Gaia in aligning.
Redesigning herself in response, mutating to meet the needs of life as it shows up. Orchestrating for you that even better next thing that last time you completely missed it because you were too in your head. She's constantly giving us more chances. And there is no ego to Gaia that's like, oh, well, fine. If they don't see it by this time in history, I'm going to blow it all up. It's not like that. But sometimes we need a catalyst moment to come back to our senses. And that's a place that, sometimes you need to just kind of bop the dog on the head to make it stop being crazy. There is a moment of, not advocating violence here, but there is a moment of just needing to kind of use that Gate 51 channel of shock to initiate us into what? No, not initiate us into more suffering, not initiate us into more hard work, initiate us back into what really matters. Gate 25, universal love, the spirit of innocence.
Yeah. So when I think of Gaia, and like we just went through it was only a stage 1 hurricane here last weekend, but very rare for us here in Southern California.
I didn't notice.
But when they did, so it was like, a bunch of the climate people were like, see, she's mad.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When it was said and done this week, all the weather reporters went, wow, the last time we had one like that was in the 60s. And there were multiple. And then it showed all the dates. And I just start laughing because I think of this cost of planning and how dumb it is. Because it's like we've cartooned or created this, like we've created the idea of like how The Sims or, some sort of like weird way that life should be. Like the weather should look like this all the time. When if you look at the history of Gaia, it's actually got more patterns. And we've been through patterns like we're seeing now. It's the idea that this is abnormal is just insane. It's normal. Like if you look at all of the data and you look at all of it, and even when they try and tell you like this is the hottest it's been, and then there's like they said here in California, like in September at the very beginning, first week, Gavin Newsom was like, oh my gosh, this is our hottest week we've seen in so long, right? And then it's just like, it didn't break the record from 1907. It didn't break the record. You know what I mean? It's like,
more
we're not
propaganda.
breaking. Like, exactly.
More manifester inspired propaganda because it's so effective. Inform with fear and you'll get compliance. So, that's where we just have to kind of, again, take the step back from the mind, from like just being, smashed up in our mind and everything that it's thinking, and be like, what is my mind thinking right now in response to this? Like, what are these thoughts? Whose thoughts are these that I'm feeling that are streaming through me? You probably have an undefined ajna if you're watching this, because most people do. And it's like when you become the witness of that mental patterning field, that's when you actually open your mind to becoming the vessel for pure consciousness. And that's what the quota is that I was referring to before. That's what Gaia wants. She wants us to be truly cognitive. What does it mean to be truly cognitive? To be one and thinking in unison with the mind of God, with the mind of universe. You can't do that when you're in this truncated little contracted box of what's the next fear I need to prepare for. Prepare for your greatness. Prepare to be the best you've ever been. Prepare to be stronger than you've ever been. Prepare to be more inspired than you ever have been. Prepare to be counted in history. Prepare to live your mythology.
Yeah, be prepared to do your strategy and authority when it's there.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the preparation actually really is in life is the moment, is when the moment's the moment and it's the divine moment. It's it. That's all you prepare for in life. Like it's not so hard. I feel like, it's a very weird eclipse. If I were to give you the astrological version, if we can just go real quick. So this eclipse is really interesting to me because one, let's just like look at where it's going to be like on the map, right? Mm. So it's going to be going through Europe the most and all the way at the northern part of Africa. But it's interesting because, the greatest part of it's going to be going through Russia and Ukraine. And so I think that's a little interesting of where that's kind of a hot spot right now where people are definitely feeling like there's something off going on. So this is going to bring a lot of that, especially Scorpio, and unearthing a lot of the truth about what's really going on over there. But what's interesting too to me is the sorrow cycle that it's part of. So every set of eclipses go through sorrow cycles. And so we can look down these years, and I thought this was the interesting one. We're going through a sorrow cycle that's connected to the same cycle of eclipses that actually was in July 18th of 1860, which was, of course, the Civil War beginnings. It was actually a little bit right after that. And of course, it wasn't in the same zodiac sign or anything like that. But it's an interesting set of eclipses where, that was the really crazy change point of this kind of separatism, right, that was going on. And it's an interesting moment again that we're in this kind of separatism element in the world right now. And I think that it's on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, where people are separate from their spiritual selves and living in their kind of a crazy, obsessed kind of, way that they want the plan to work. Because if you think of the 1860 divide, it was about the South wanting to maintain their way of their planned life. Mm-hmm. Right? I want to keep slaves, and we want to keep the Southern vibration, how we want to hold on to it. And this is the plan. And it's always been the plan. And we're going to keep that plan. And we're going to change the plans, whether you like it or not. If Lincoln gets elected that year, which he did, we're going to secede, and we're going to stay to our plan, and it didn't work for them. And then when you start looking at some of these other ones, it's like, this is kind of an interesting time period, because there's not a lot that's like hitting me too hard here with any of these, except that 1860. But looking at where we're at for this one, it's definitely one that is happening in an area, at least, that's really the weird spot, which Europe is the spot where, if we are going to think of, when you were talking about the real ego and what its purposes here is for, is to serve and be there and think of the community and think of others and stuff. I mean, there is these crazy things happening, like no energy, like what is Europe going to do? And it's being, such a weird way right now. Like the queen, who's dead, by the way, is just, that's the news all day. The queen, king. And you and I haven't even got into all that stuff yet. But I feel like it's like, we'll get into that probably on our next talk. But it's like, this is kind of an interesting moment here where it really is kind of about this huge focus. If we look at the 1861 and we look at where it was at, it did go through America. It did go through the southern-northern divide, right?
Wow.
So what I'm trying to show is that where this weird energy is going is definitely going to be about Europe, Russia, Ukraine, and the breaking apart of because the EU's chart, the European Union's chart, is pretty wild. So if I show you all that, the European Union astrology chart, it's a Scorpio. And what's really interesting about it is, actually I just saw it. Yeah, Euro introduction in here. Well, that was the Euro itself. But the European Union, that was the 57. There's one that's from the 80s. Gosh, how are they not showing that to me? 2000.
Another big pattern I've noticed lately with people is that they're just over it. They're over anything that doesn't feel good to their soul. Even if it makes them a ton of money, they're just done with the limitations of our previous tribal bargains and bonds. And that's actually a huge aspect of Scorpio and Taurus eclipse cycles. It's about liberating us from unwieldy commitments and bonds and contracts that are not pleasing to, like, your Uranian high self, that are not pleasing to where our evolution is going. And we're more ready than ever to intelligently take ourselves out of these systems.
It was funny. I was just looking at the European Union chart of November 1st, 1993. This is the one that's used. And I was thinking, right when you said that, it's Uranus and Neptune dead conjunct in Capricorn, where it's like the plan to keep all these people together in this kind of spiritual space, but they're trapped. It's like, you need to let them be free. And it's interesting that 2020 and the big conjunctions that happen there is breaking that apart. And I said this in 2016, that this would be the fall of the European Union. And I feel like looking at Mars and Pluto dead conjunct and Scorpio, Mercury retrograde, I think that sits in the 1 gate actually, where we're seeing Uranus opposing that Mercury retrograde. And we're seeing the south node heading towards the sun of it. We're seeing Pluto squaring the Jupiter at 27 of Libra that's going to be coming up during these eclipses. And then we're going to see the Venus conjunction and its inferior conjunction in the big, burning of Venus at the last degrees of Libra on this Jupiter. This chart and the Saturn return of the European Union, it's not looking hot. And so, but I think that people shouldn't be scared of that, because I feel like the plans are all falling apart. And I really do feel that, looking at this eclipse from that point of view, from just like showing you an 1860s same sorrow cycle, and then showing you how it did divide America, and then how weird it's now in the dividing weird elements of what's about to happen in this area, is really telling to me. The last thing that I want to show people is back in, and of course it's really crazy, but it was October 23rd of 2014 when we had a solar eclipse, and it would have been around, it was in Scorpio, and it was with Venus exactly like this. So it was just 8 years ago, all three at 0 degrees, right? And what's interesting to me is, because I remember watching this one and tripping the hell out. It was gnarly. We have to remember Venus is at its detriment. It doesn't like being in Scorpio. It's also an interesting moment to me, thinking of that this is the Saturn square point, 7-year cycle that we're in. That Saturn's at these like 22, it's gonna be at 18 and 19, but it's in the Saturn square to this. But it's an interesting one, because we're seeing it again, and it was a Venus retrograde in Capricorn at the beginning of 2014, and it was a Venus retrograde in Capricorn the beginning of this year. And then when you think of the Ukraine situation, it was 2014 that the whole country changed. They switched things up, and Obama, and then there was the Donbass little war thing and all that. And so it's all coming back up. And I know that it might sound weird that I'm even going into this place, but it's for those that do want to kind of see where we're going to, like, if we were to use we're watching the movie, and we're going to see how the things are going to change in such weird ways that are going to be very weird, because the solar eclipse is going to be in opposition to Uranus. It's going to be with the South Node, and then we have a lunar eclipse that follows with Uranus dead conjunct the lunar eclipse, and the sun opposing it, and Mercury and the sun, and a Mars retrograde in between. That I'm like, because I remember this eclipse in 2014. I remember being like, this is impossible. Because if you look at the hours back, it was literally like one of those days where you just woke up in the morning, and you woke up in the morning, and it was like, you're about to wake up, and the sun's in Libra, Venus is in Libra, the moon's in Libra. And it was like, okay, now we're in Scorpio. And then Venus was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go into Scorpio too. Right. And then, you know what? The moon, I'm going to join with you at the same time and have an eclipse. And so there's so much connected to this moment in your life. For me, I was in very deep fear and anxiety. I was actually having a panic attack. And it was over just fear of having another panic attack. It wasn't even about anything external in my life going bad. It was more of my internals are not under control, that I don't know how I could even be in the outside world anymore. So it might help people if they're going through that to realize, you got to take the risk to do the inner work, to get the help that you need to transform. You can't stay stagnant in the dark room like I was, watching it from my window in Hollywood, and be in such a deep fear that you can't access the greatness that you just described, or the greatness that you can always be in this life, and the amazing inspirational aspects that this life has to have. I'll never forget this eclipse, because it scared the bejesus out of me. But we're about to have the same eclipse. Venus, the sun are going to be dead conjunct, if we look at it, on October 25th. And, it's really interesting to see it from this point of view, to see the same thing happen again. As an astrologer, I'm somebody who is just like, oh, I remember this. It's back again. 2 degrees all together. Now it's 2 degrees away from the 0 degree spot, but it's interesting to me to see that we're seeing a solar eclipse dead conjunct Venus again. in an 8-year cycle, which is a Venus cycle anyway. And this one's different, of course, because it's at a time with the South Node being with it. And we saw the last one with the North Node in Libra. And so this is actually in the sign with the nodes. And this one, if you think of the EU's chart and you think of where we're going in this radicalized new way of a new world, a new frequency that is going to feel odd and different. That's the great risk, is to not be afraid for a better frequency, Uranus and Taurus North Node, and to shed. To me, this is about shedding all of the attachment. Mm-hmm. Because really attachment, I would say, is something that is a risk to take in Scorpio. It's like when you let go of your attachment and you take the risk to let go of the attachment, it's like there's Uranus in the North Node and Taurus, like, we got you. And it's not you spinning off. You know what it is, spinning off the road? The cross of planning is actually the best way that you describe for your own personal life and how you're guided. We have to get off this road that's been planned in Super Mario Kart.
Yeah.
And instead of the turtle picking us up and putting us back on the road, it's putting us on a whole other.
It's the secret level.
Yeah, exactly.
That you could always see from like the corner of your eyes. You're driving on the normal one. You're like, how do you get to that huge loop? And it's like only by jumping the tracks.
Right.
And that is a moment that directly confronts your conditioned mind's desire to keep you alive. And its only directive is to maintain certainty. That will keep us alive. So you have to be able to challenge one of your deepest instincts, gate 28, fear of death, in order to open yourself up to the risk that's worth taking.
So because I want to know what gates these two planets are in, or maybe three, because this is what's going to be the shift in between the eclipses. Is one, Mars at 25 of Gemini, because that's going to be stationing in retrograde in between the eclipses on October 30th, 4 days after. Two, it's in square to Neptune at 23, which I know is probably somewhere in the solar plexus, probably, of Pisces. And then three is Jupiter at the 0 Aries and then retrograding back into Pisces. I don't know if it still stays in, if there is a correlating gate that shifts with this area, because this is going to be extreme, that we're going to see a Mars retrograde right after this eclipse, a Jupiter retrograde back into Pisces, retrograde to the last degree, which is the degree of having to surrender all faith. It's the last degree. It's one where you learn to transcend by giving it to God, giving it to the universe. You don't force anything at all. You have to surrender. And then Mars in retrograde scoring Neptune and Pisces is extreme, because it's one where people can be so misguided by not paying attention subconsciously to their actions and only by their mind, not listening to their intuition and spirit. Neptune's in its home sign of Pisces. It's the ruler of Pisces. And even it's ironic too that Neptune is sitting at the borderline in Vedic, or if you want to use, that system, Neptune sitting on the line between, coming there, that 23-degree line is where we move into Neptune and Pisces in, using that system. So I feel like every system is showing us that we're in a very extreme, just on the first eclipse, and it gets crazier after. Mm-hmm. So I would like to know, especially where's that Mars retrograde in the human design, that 25th degree of Gemini at?
That is gate 12. It's in the throat center. And it's directed down at gate 22, which is the potential for spiritual awareness to express itself or to manifest something out of spirit awareness. And this is usually in the mundane context, about our unique nature, what we bring to the table as our unique character in this life, because that is, in essence, an expression of our spirit and the way that God filters, or the universe filters through us. Gate 12 with Mars there, another detriment. And it's about self-hatred. And what that really means is the tendency that we have to reject our feelings, to reject our emotions, because we misjudge them as inconvenient fluctuations in our energy or things that we should be ashamed of. But actually, every emotion that's moving through our body, through our emotional system, is, like we've said many times on this show before, it's an emanation of your unlimited self rewiring your physical self to hold more of who you really are, what you really are, expanding your bandwidth. So Mars retrograde in gate 12, line 3 in a not self world is, self-hate, inadequacies in social interaction that lead to expression of self-hatred. This is like incel culture.
So then where's Neptune? I can't see the gate at the bottom.
Neptune is in 36.
Okay, so
it's in the first line of 36.
Because that's going to be the square that's going to be lasting October 30th through, probably all of November.
Mm-hmm. And usually squares form a channel in human design, I've noticed. So where Mars was previously in the 35, creating this whole channel of transitoriness, which is just all about launching into new experiences, either out of shame and sadness about how something didn't work out, or out of anticipation towards a new possibility. It will have kind of moved into a more introspective individual area where we're kind of meeting with, where our spirit doesn't fit in our outer life, essentially.
Right.
And what that, do we internalize that as something's wrong with me? Or do we externalize that as, oh no, I've got to find a different context for my spirit to actually find a home? And this gate 12 is called the Gate of Standstill, but it's also the Gate of Caution. So it's about knowing, based on how in attunement with your spirit that you are, whether or not it's time to share, whether or not it's time to speak. And there is like a very strong prophetic kind of undertone to this gate, because it is the voice of spirit speaking. In the third line, it's still unsure of itself. Trial and error, mutation, adaptation. We're not quite sure if it is time to full on bring, our spiritual awareness into the room. But where this is actually beginning its retrograde on Halloween is in line 4, which is called the Prophet. Prophet. So it's about having this fixed nature of how you express your spirit. And we're definitely going to see this expansion or this, acceleration or amplification of people coming forth, speaking out their spiritual experiences, and that contributing to and confirming a global awakening process. And that's what the solar plexus is doing. It's showing us that we're not so different from each other when we get out of that damn ego.
Well, and I feel that it's that right angle too that's all about learning who it is, right? And it's almost like if it's in that 12th gate of caution, of knowing when to speak and maybe when to maybe not have to speak. Because when you try to understand yourself, maybe because of its, especially if I guess if it was an undefined throat in somebody or something like that, right? It would definitely be like speaking out of turn all the time, probably, right? Where it's kind of like, did you just say that? Like, it's not the time to, like, what did you just say? Like, it's not heard, it's not recepted, it's not manifested correctly, it's not created correctly. That it's the lesson in the third line, of course, experimenting and going through the experiences with it, but knowing which experiences and having some caution of just knowing again, you just know in life when to say something. You just don't walk up to somebody on the street and just be like, you look like a piece of shit, like,
well,
unless they're walking around at a fashion show and acting like it and be like, everybody take a picture of me and tell me how great I am. Then that's a moment where it's like, sorry, you're not that great, honey. If that's what you're if that's what you feel. I feel like it's
Well, it's interesting because the 22, the other side of this channel is selective hearing or deafness. So if you're not in tune with the emotional and climate of the space that you're in or the energy you're in, you're deaf to what the room is actually listening for. You can't hear it, so you can't say what will be heard. And it's also about selective hearing in the sense that if you're not even in the mood to be there in the first place, you're going to miss everything about that emotional landscape that would have connected you and, you know, allowed you to be in relationship to that vibration in a compelling, original way. So it's like also the fact that sometimes we can be so driven, Mars, to just get out there and say the thing, get the recognition for it, that we didn't even ask ourselves if we even care about it or if it's actually pertinent to us. And so it's like, yeah, you really got to tap in and know when it's time for the revolution to speak up and share your insight. Are you around the right people or not? Because also in a time of division, the wrong thing in the wrong context, because you're not in your strategy and authority, yeah, predictable results.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Chris Farley just screaming, "Kill Whitey!" Like, you know what I mean? Everybody's like, "Wait, what?" If you ever saw that movie. But it just is like, wait, what? It's definitely a time where if you want to create and you want to manifest, or especially I love that you used revolution, you just wouldn't walk into, I don't know, some protest. Oh, right, or some protest. It just totally just, I don't know, like, that's what I think we saw with a lot of the protesting in 2020, right? Was there was actually a real deep, sincere message that people wanted to deliver, and a lot of people hijacked it for their own reasons, chasing. Right? And like in cloud chasing, that's the best way to put it. So it's kind of like we might see a little bit mirroring of that, where it goes to where it's like somebody could, you know, spark something up for their own clout, but they might not even realize what's coming down the pipeline for them with that. Like they might think it's over glorified because they're not paying attention. And that's the caution, right? It's like, oh, maybe I got some response, but maybe you're not getting the response fully. That might be the best either.
It's like
you got to gauge.
If you're a bank robber and you walk into the bank and it's, if you're not in touch with the emotional vibe there, you might be like, give me your money. And everyone in the bank is just like, no, you're screwed. You know, you have to be able to read the room to get your point across, to make the revolution that's right for you.
Well, and that's been happening in this 2022 a lot, right? Is there's been a lot of people, whether it's LA or other cities across America, who've been doing this whole, like, you know, we're going to grab everything we can. And how many store owners or how many people that are concealed carries are just like taking care of business right away, right? Just like, oh, nope, sorry, bro. Boom. And it just is like, you know, we didn't see a lot of that in the past, but ever since we've seen the craziness over the last couple of years, as the plans are falling apart, that the police are always there to protect you, and we've got everybody in jail that are bad, and, you know, like all these kind of plans are falling apart. So it's kind of an interesting thing where, yeah, you definitely, I think the bank robber analogy is great. Or, you know, it just reminds me of somebody just screaming fire in a movie theater when they maybe are just having a panic attack and they just want space. It's like, just walk out of the movie theater. Don't create kind of a disturbance, because it kind of reminds me of a disturbance like in the Force, right? It reminds me of creating a disturbance that everybody else is not feeling good about, especially because there is that Neptune element in the solar plexus. Right? That it's not.
It's like trying to start a flash mob with a bunch of people who don't know the dance.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like trying to freak back when we in our old school days of of middle school at the dances, and like it was like no freaking allowed. They used to, like, right? They used to push us to the side. Like they would come in between you and say, no freaking. And it's like you going up to the hot chick and just out of nowhere, like, yeah, baby, woo! Or you see that a lot, people at parties and stuff, and it's always like, you really gonna be that person right now?
Yeah.
And especially in these times, like, people are just not, people are so so many of the social events, if you think about life right now in our collective and why a lot of it's falling apart, is because how many more times do we want to see people in clubs or in social settings just acting way not in touch with the environment and causing issues around people? And it's made it to where it's made us also, I think, realize that the idea of this cross of planning, that everything, it reminds me of a wedding. Like the way that a woman thinks of a wedding, it's going to go perfect, and they go crazy, and they hire the wedding planner, and and it never goes exactly the way that you think, ever. So it's like, it reminds me of like, we're going out, it's going to be perfect. And it's just like, this is definitely a time where it's like, I feel like there's way more wonder in the moment where you're kind of like, that's interesting. Look at that. I don't have to respond to it. I think it's interesting. And then boom, okay, let me say what I got to say now at the moment when maybe enough has been seen, or I don't know. It's one of those things where I find life so much more magical being in much more of the moment than I do in the plan. The plan's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
Because it's not the divine plan. It's our own concocted plan. And I feel like when I looked at that with that spleen and having the sun, moon, and Venus all in the same gate right on top of each other, and it brings me back to the last time, is 2 degrees also the same gate of Scorpio?
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody remembers, I mean, I'm an astrologer, so I was literally like so aware of it, right? That I remember it I'm going to prepare people. It does have a feeling of, like you feel it in your physical body, but you feel it in a way of like something is going on, and I am not. You can tell where you're not feeling good about things, and you can tell where you're feeling better about things. I remember being in Hollywood in 2014, and then you look back at what was going on in Hollywood during those years, and I was surrounded by darkness without even knowing it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's the craziest part for me to take. Looking 8 years later, was like, man, it was dark. There were so many. Then I was just like, what people thought were laughing at me. I was the only guy that had the apartment in my little Melrose Place apartment that was doing astrology and like had my own green screen and was in TV, but like they were all going to auditions and like going to like producer parties and all these things, and like, why are you here Saturday night filming on your green screen, you know? Like, and I was like, cause like, I don't know, I was responding to my life. I was feeling good. And like, I'm here now, and I get so many text emails from them still today, like, so proud of you, bro. Like, I had to move back to Minnesota, you know? So it's kind of that idea too of like, maybe your idea of surviving is not the plan's way or other people's idea of the way. That's been kind of, Scorpio to me reminds me of like a pesticide that is kind of like, or like some sort of weird, like, you know, like parasite that's drilled in your mind, like one that's directly gone in, of like all these thoughts of how it should be to get what you want. Because remember, Scorpio is the sign of receiving. I want this and I need it. And it's not about creating it. It's more about like, I just want it to show up in my life. And like, it's interesting that this is an energy of things showing up in your life, but also where you're contributing to being in the right space and being in that right spaces in the moment, and not being afraid to take a risk to go when it shows up in the right way. That it's a two-way street with these nodes and with Taurus and Scorpio. It's not you're just going to receive everything and you know, you have to respond to it, or you have to take the invite, or you have to take the risk to take something better. Like, you can't just think it's just all going to transform and I'm just not going to have to do anything.
I'm kind of inspired to see this another way. Last thing about this Scorpio,
I would love it.
That it's actually a really easeful in terms of Venusian. Venusian is flow. It's like, it's easy money, right? It's easy relationship. It's ease in the release, south node, of the fear of death.
Right, and you bring up a good point, because the south node, or K2, and Venus really do like the benefics. Love Jupiter, Venus love the south node. They don't like being on the north node.
Yeah.
And the reason why is in Vedic astrology, Jupiter or Venus, when on the north node, has to deal with half of its benefic energy to maintain Rahu's ego drive of its wants and its needs for destiny and desire, right? So half of the good energy is used to just make sure that that doesn't happen to you. That you don't lose yourself in, let's call it the matrix, or in the mind, or in the because that's what's weird about Western astrology and Vedic is I actually like the Vedic version of the North or Rahu better. That Rahu is great. Like, it's part of our destiny. It's a very powerful, very, very Mars Jupiter aspect, if you think of it. But it's also very malefic in people's lives when you you push too hard. You push too hard. Whereas in the South Node, there's not a lot of push. It's the opposite. It's K2. It's much more and the benefics like it because there's a peaceful energy about it. There's a spiritual energy about it. Because they don't use Neptune in Vedic astrology, they use K2 as like our Neptune. And so there is that element of like a Neptunian process. Like you said, it's a beautiful kind of Venusian process to it, where this is different than the one 8 years ago because that was the North Node eclipse. And that's why I said at the beginning of this, the Venus or any South Node eclipse is a little softer than the North Node ones, because Rahu is like the dragon's mouth just wanting to, and he has no stomach, so it's never enough. Whereas the South Node, it has the body of the dragon, right? So there is a moment where it's like, oh, I've got enough of that, So I like that you have that perspective with it, because that's actually very true, and I didn't even think of that because that was a wild time in 2014. This one's definitely a wild time, but I feel like this allows us to actually push through. It's like a birthing, right? That's not, I mean, we're not women, so I don't know what it would be like to have a child like that. But I would feel like it would be one that's a lot more of like a natural birth at home, maybe a water birth or something that kind of
like slips out. And
that's what's interesting, right? You go to a hospital today in the plan, and women are screaming bloody murder through it and having to take meds or whatever. And in Tad Man's work, you can use his lifetime arcs, and you can just even use which planets are on the ascendant and know your mom at birth took a bunch of meds to get you through, and you got stuck in the birth canal because it numbed a bunch of things out, and you got like he created a system where you can tell that. And so it reminds me of where it's a graceful but intense, powerful, beautiful, transformative birthing and shedding of the old attachments to things that we don't need to keep looking back either. I feel like that's the problem, right? Like the past traumas or past things or the worry that something similar, right? Like the idea of a relationship or some project you're doing, or when you've run out of money before. All these Venus Scorpio traits are not to be feared that it will happen again. That's what's coming up with all these transits, is the fear that you're going to go through another experience of any of those beautiful Venus things going bad. And if you try to birth that, like you say, it's like you're mutating it that way. You're not allowing it to not go that way, like by just allowing
giving yourself a hemorrhoid.
Yeah, exactly. Without cooling gel.
And it's interesting that it's in an undefined center, so this is not, even though it's a big focus in terms of this body graph, and we should switch it over just to the personality side to really get the full effect. But
yeah, it's funny because I didn't even know that, but I was just feeling like, oh, this is probably undefined, by the way.
It's a place where what happens to us when we have an undefined spleen? We absorb and amplify the fears of the world, often to dramatic effect, and in a lot of ways paralyzing ourselves from taking action. But it's unfounded because it's almost like the nodes you were saying. It's like this disembodied intensity that actually isn't grounded in anything here on Earth. And that's the not self theme. And so what is the not self theme of the spleen? holding on to things that are no longer relevant to our health and survival and our growth because they make us comfortable or they make us feel safe. Jobs, relationships, belief systems, self-perception, all these things, and, substances in our body, weed, alcohol, drugs, anything that gives us that sense of, oh, I'm okay now. If we have an open spleen, we hold on to these things because we don't feel like we can survive without them. So a big, fat question to ask yourself in this lunation is, what am I holding on to for dear life that is not giving me life?
Yeah.
And am I really willing to shit it out so that I can feel better finally? And stop recreating these cycles of compensation. Oh, I'm stressed out, I'll just have a little more wine. Oh, I'm stressed out again, I'll have a little more weed. It's like you're in this constant battle with yourself, keeping yourself at this low ceiling vibration, keeping your vitality low, keeping your intuition blocked off. You've got to release it. You've got to go through the detox symptoms. It's not going to be pleasant at first. Birth isn't pleasant, maybe in some ways, for the baby, even if the mom is having like an orgasmic water birth, who knows? But what I'm saying is, the main point is, yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable for a minute. And that's what happens for us undefined or open spleen people. We're not always comfortable. We're not always feeling good in our body. But that doesn't mean change the whole pattern to soothe that. It means keep moving forward.
Well, and I think with the nodes being at the monopole 1 and 2 gates in the center of the whole chart, being this navigation guide to understanding, knowing who you are inside, like knowing who you are instead of basing it off the fears of survival or the fears of all these things, going, that's not who I am, is those fears. Like, it's like, if you really think about, maybe this is what's so crazy of how when Ra came up with this system, the North Node in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio, it's exalted. Like, the North Node in Taurus is exalted. The North Node in Scorpio in the opposite is not good. Like, it's not as positive. But it's kind of interesting that they land right now. If you were to think of the nodes being, the true north and the true identity of the understanding of our destiny, it's pointed up at that one going up. And then that south node there is at that second gate, boom. And it's right smack dab in the middle. The nodes are perfectly in the center of everything of the body graph.
The prime emanations of who we are, what we are, how our energy moves through the different dimensional layers of life to come into form. Our gate 1, primal creative essence, the masculine principle, and gate 2, the receptive, the feminine principle that takes in everything without judgment and creatively creates a path forward for all of us. So, gate 2 really being an emphasis on the divine feminine. Is that what anyone's talking about in the mainstream? No, we're talking about crisis that is an echo of patriarchal systems that are slated for execution by the global cycles. And what's actually happening, the divine feminine is guiding the direction of humanity. And I'm not saying,
and honestly,
women.
The true way to survive, if it's coming into alignment and looking at that channel 14 in the sacral, it actually is that divine feminine that's going to teach us how to get through this, not how we're going to manifest and build again.
Right.
And that's what's funny. The slogan around the world has been build back better. But it's kind of an irony because there is this idea that's going around of building back better, the cross of planning, not building back or building just building better now in a different way, in a different frequency.
Not back.
But that's what's ironic is build back better would be allowing the divine feminine to guide, which that's not what's being said.
Nope.
Right? Like that's not what's being said with it or what's behind it. And I think that's kind of a the illusionary element of the South Node is they give feminine themes like take care of planet Earth, or, you know, like it's kind of a trickster energy to me. It's kind of like let's kind of use divine feminine for not its true guidance, and let's not even have real divine feminine energy that's around in the planet give the opinions, right? Or give the guidance or give the responses to what any of it is. And that's the interesting part. And I love that you bring that up, because I mean, really, the cycle showed us in astrology with Regulus moving into Virgo in 2012, with what's been happening over the last 10 years has been the rise of the divine feminine, which really, it's not so much the rise, it's the equalization that's deserved, aligned, and part of the frequency, and always has been. That is being, we are retrieving our lost information that has been gone and been, I hate to say it, been hijacked, and also been falsely, propped up as not aligned equally. And that's the detriment to the cross of planning. I mean, I'm not a big patriarchy person. I know Ra was, and I know a lot of people are. But I feel what happened was, if we look at this cross of planning, it was about building structures and plans. So the masculine energy is that energy. So it kind of got sucked into that, which the whole cross of planning is going to do something wrong off, right? There's going to be something that, because if you follow the cycles, you know that you can't build a plan that's not natural, and kind of, it does reach a point to where we're at now, where it's going to fall apart, to where, you just can't keep putting more concrete or more patches on things, right? Like the feminine is always wanting to heal fully, not
get to the bottom of it,
right? Like not put another Band-Aid on it. Like that's what's so beautiful about the divine feminine for masculine, is us masculines go, I'll throw a Band-Aid on it, I'll spit on it, and I'll just keep going. And it's like when a divine feminine comes into your life and they see that, they are going to call it out so fast. Be like, hey, you haven't healed this at all. You tell me you're healing. You're just patching it up. Mm-hmm. And this is where maybe we can't be living with patches anymore. Emotional patches, like you said. Oh, another hit of weed, or another drink, or another thing. Mm-hmm. Right? The divine feminine, I think, there's that healing element of allowing us to be who we are, but also not being afraid to be a guide and say, hey, it doesn't have to be this way anymore. This can be an energy that you can actually transcend, and that you can actually face, and gives us the grace and the comfort to actually face it. Whereas, I see a lot of these like kind of divine masculine channels with like, oh, we will heal you through being really strong. Like that's what the Andrew Tate kind of thing was. And I get that a lot of guys are upset about it, but it's like, that's not the way that we're moving. That's not the way to fix these problems. That's not the way that the life is going. It's just not, because it's out of alignment. And even if it's divine feminine only, then it's going in the wrong direction too. Mm-hmm. But it's the equalization of both. And I feel like with that energy you just brought up, it's the guidance, and then allowing the masculine to integrate that guidance and see what happens. Mm-hmm. Which reminds me of the high priestess. And kind of in the quarrel with the Hierophant right now, where it's like the Hierophant's had its day. Sorry, Pope, I know you want all the money in the Vatican by September 30th. You obviously are tripping out because the plan's about to fall. Mm-hmm. That the Hierophant's falling. And that's the systems, the religious systems, and all the programs that come with the plan. And it was all masculine based, especially the Vatican. Like, let's just let the feminine heal people with wounds, clean up our toilets, and be nuns only.
Right.
But
no voice.
No voice at all. Only in the hospital room, that you will never see a bishop, a pope, a priest in. And actually the lowest of the priests, like, hey, you got to go pray and do a bunch of rosary moments for the people in the hospital right now. What? As they're smoking their cigarettes in the Vatican court. Because if you actually see every time they go meet, there's a whole area and they're all smoking cigs and they're all fucking, And it's like a normal job to them. kind of the mundane, like, oh, gotta go in, gotta go talk with God. Like, it's kind of an interesting, weird thing. And that now we're seeing a king as a monarch when we've been in this feminine monarch energy, but she really didn't, I think, hold a very feminine energy. I hate to say it. I mean, I know people are in mourning and a lot of people are upset that I've been kind of going off about the whole Queenie thing, but it's like, I hate to say it, she really didn't represent the divine feminine at all. In my opinion, like, she didn't. She actually did everything a divine feminine is against. Like, if you really look at her paying her, giving her son who did horrible things to women with Epstein, here's 12 million, son, so you can get out of that, so you don't go to jail. Like, what happened with Princess Diana? Queenie didn't look after her fellow feminine. She looked after her son and protected him through that whole thing. So
she was human.
Yeah. I'm just saying, though, that it's time for different.
Yes.
Different energy that represents what divine feminine is, which is not a single person.
No.
And I don't think that's why this King Charles thing is going to work really well. Like, I think the idea of, again, a monarch, right, which is so talked about with the cross prior to planning, when it was the world of monarchs and manifestors, and like, he kind of reminds me of them trying to bring it back. And it's interesting. People have fallen for this spell more than any other lately. It's like the craze about it.
Or so it seems. But I think on a much more, I mean, even the collective that is our community around this show and this network, it's a huge expression of the divine feminine North Node direction.
Yeah.
So many of these beings who no one on the public scale knows who these people are, because they're just normal people. But they're doing amazing things. They are building the new earth.
Right.
They are making the moves. They are taking the preparations as guided by the inner authority, by the higher self. And it's like, you know, you don't see the roots of the mycelium network. You know, the fungus, the mushrooms are some of the largest beings on the planet. You only see a little toadstool. But underneath that, there's miles and miles of a network of almost a nervous system. I think that's kind of the energy that's really taking hold around the planet, is that there's so many more of us than them. And there's so many of us that have had the privilege and the opportunity to be in more direct connection with our divine parts than ever, and to have that manifest in these quiet ways that are ready to catch humanity as it falls. Maybe not completely, maybe not in a utopian sense, but that's what the divine feminine does. That's what Gate 2 does. It doesn't discriminate. It actually just responds purely to whatever is there. And that's what calls forth the ingenuity and the creativity of like what we know as Gaia.
Well, yeah, and I feel, I'm reading the chat and I love what you say, because it is the people that we don't see propped up that are doing the work. If we think of the cross of planning ending, when I think of a monarchy, like the last remaining true monarchy left, most of them that are still around don't have such illusionary Disneyland power. It's the illusion.
It's a fairy tale.
Because what people might not want to hear, but what is the truth, is that that system of governance of the people is still there to try and calm down the people,
right,
and create the spectacle of a grounded, and that we are the elite that know how it works and how it's going to be done. And we provide your money and we provide how it all goes down, without realizing that in those monarch parliamentary constitutions, okay, there's all these bypasses to where, let's say in the parliament, the people have a bill that they really like and they get it through, the monarch can take it away. And I know that people have tried to prove me wrong. It's literally on Wikipedia. Like it's in the constitutions. Like people don't realize that the reason why that the prime minister reports every week to the monarch is because there's secret sessions. They don't have to be recorded. In America, everything has to be recorded, including the president's calls, including what's in Congress. We get to see them all. The most secret meetings that are in your face are the monarch happening with the prime minister every week. And people are just into the lost Disneyland spectacle that this, like people are in here like, oh, Harry's the true king and all. This is where you lose yourself because you're giving, why is he the king? Why is anybody the king? These people are no different than anybody else. They've just created the great grand spectacle and from an old time, and people are still buying it. And it's part of the cost of planning that will be the realization that these people literally do nothing to cause anything to actually stay together. And it's the idea of trying to cool down the energy because it's a really good psyop. It's a great psyop of like the people like, oh, the king has shown up. Even the way that they let the monarch into the parliamentary house and the way that the door, they make the people feel like they're special because the parliament opens the door for the queen. Like you're coming into our house to make you feel like we have some sort of power as people still, but you're not walking in and opening the door to Buckingham Palace or the $1 billion castles that have been just given to William and to all these people. Like it's insane. And how much more money in taxes the monarch has been given to keep the spectacle going just in the last 2 years alone is mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. To just a family of people that have a lot of inbred, have a lot of weird fucking situations going on, and literally can get away with anything because there's no accountability. They can do whatever they want, and there is no enforcement on what they do. Zero. The queen could literally, back in the day, walk up and chop someone's head off. And guess what? Because that's what Henry VIII did to a lot of his people, or the Tower of London has had many, including one of my 13th great-grandfathers was killed at the Tower of London and chopped his head off. That there's no accountability. Still, the idea that these people that believe in the spectacle, and I'm just going to be so 5'1" right now, that still believe in the spectacle are retarded because literally Charles right now could literally go be a pedophile like his brother and nobody will hold him accountable. Parliament won't go, oh, da, 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 da. Even as we just saw with his brother Andrew and all the evidence and all the stuff, just pay $12 million, he's out. And they tried to do it by getting it into America because when he wasn't there. But the power of that monarch and the mystic they have and the false, it's the great Oz that is just literally ruining people's lives and making them afraid. Everybody in Australia that's in a big portion of the country want out. And now they're being like, you were being disrespectful. It's the Queen's 10 days of mourning. Like, so? I mean, what's interesting in the astrology is that we're in the Pluto return in America, and it's like we're a country that already did this a long time ago. We said, fuck you, and we left. So when Americans say it, we look at everybody like, what are you guys doing? Mm-hmm. Because it's on the local level. Republics are where it's like, we live in Orange County. So like, you know, the people who are representatives in Orange County and the city and the local and the county, guess what? Orange County has a special kind of vibe, and anybody in there, if they try to tweak it too much, oh, people are going to go, no. And it's people on people. Like I can go shake hands with the guy he's going to live or the woman streets down. Not with a huge wall, not with a huge palace, not with guards around it, which look exactly like the Vatican, who have the Swiss guards that are guarding the money that the Pope's demanding right now. You don't think it's all set up the same way that the Pope asked on August 23rd and 24th for all this money to be moved to the vault? And then we see just a week and a half later, the Queen pass and King Charles comes in and the money from the the Bank of England be like, oh yeah, we're going to change the money to King Charles now. And it's all in their little plan that's going to fall apart. And everybody's falling for the stupid spectacle and getting like lost in it.
I think it's only about 16% actually that are falling for it.
Well, I can tell you from just the show we did on Monday night that it's a lot more. And then even in the country, it's been amazing to see Australians' response and the people's response and how many people are flocking to go see her casket go through Scotland, which that's another thing. She died in Scotland for a reason, to keep Scotland in the whole fold. It's a historical thing. There's been William Wallace is rolling in his grave right now. The fact that England is back to controlling the legislature, which Scotland has their independence, but still is part of the United Kingdom. And that was King James who, became king of both. And so I think that this is where people are just not understanding that this way of life is done. To even see a guy like King Charles come up into this, who happens to be a Scorpio, which is going to be really ironic to see these transits for him. And then you see Biden, who's a Scorpio. You see all these Scorpios popping up when this is not their time with the South Node. They're the illusion. And so, I don't know, man. I feel that, I think that needed to be said. I felt like I had to say it.
Good. Hereticing.
And I don't even think it's that bad of a heretic one. Like, I know my gauge. I know my 12th gate pretty well, I guess.
Yeah.
Where I feel like I gave a 1 out of 10 on extreme heretic. That was 1 out of 10 for me.
That was just information.
It was just one line shit with a little tad bit of 5, a little just dust of it. But I feel like if we could look at the lunar eclipse that follows it to finish this off, we've got to because
this is what replaces. I feel like this is replacement. One last thing about the solar eclipse was that
he's making sure the computer works for you.
Oh.
Something happened, but we can still talk about it.
Yeah, it was just to add that we have this idea of incarnation crosses that we all carry. We all bear a cross in this life in a funny little way, and in a big way actually. And so the cross that's activated during the Scorpio solar on the 25th is the cross of the unexpected. So there is also that theme of the programming partners bringing in this unexpected theme. What is 28, the risk taker, the game player, balanced by Earth in the 27 in Taurus, which is nurturing, which is nourishment, sacral energy. But in line 1, you have this. In line 1, it's all about...
Oh, that's the solar eclipse, right?
Yeah, just to finish out that discussion. Okay. It's, you got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of anyone else.
That's true.
So now we're on the lunar Taurus on October 8th.
So it's interesting. So we're in the unexpected incarnation cross, and then this one's going to be the Sphinx then?
The Sphinx, the direction of humanity, is highlighted, and something about that is brought to a culmination point.
It's weird that the solar eclipse building into this does hit Egypt, where the Sphinx is. It's that bottom or that top part of Africa, but the bottom part.
And the Sphinx, was originally a lion, was not originally a person. That was an alteration to confuse people. But anyway.
Well, I mean, they really like messing with identifications. You can identify as whatever you want now. So,
right. They'll keep 3/4 of it intact and change just the face to make it seem like it's still divine, but it's serving their image, their false idol. So anyway.
Oh, I love seeing that 17th gate gone with Jupiter.
Why?
Because I feel like
It is the
When
gate
it's
of
in
opinion.
Aries, but it's in the fucking head, in the mind, it's overthinking what the identification is of things.
Mm-hmm. So, lunar eclipse. It's quite a powerful polarity here with the sun in gate 1, line 3. Remember, line 3 is our most dense, physical, manifest here, right here in the room. It's like the stuff, gate 3 is the stuff. So it's about money. There's something monetary or financial or material about this energy of this particular one. And that's kind of what I was referring to, is like in line 3 of gate 1, to start things off, this is a place where we can get so stuck in the thing that we've done in the past that made us money that we don't ever get to continue our creative evolution. Gate 1 is this primal creative force. It just wants to create new forms, new ideas, new ways. But in line 3, we bump into something that works out really well for us on the material level. And so we stay in this old way. So it's about examining and releasing the South Node old ways of being stuck in our creative process because we were stuck on the financial, we're stuck on the material level. So we can transform and adapt and mutate into something new, more beneficial, more creative, more evolutionary. Earth is grounding us in line 2. So Earth, North Node, the Moon, and Uranus all in gate 2.
And they are right on the Moon and Uranus. This lunar eclipse, this full moon, is dead exact on Uranus.
Mm-hmm. And remember, this is the gate of the monopole. This is the gate of the direction of any one of us as individuals, as well as, the earth itself. And it's also this essence of the divine feminine, or just the feminine principle, the receptive as opposed to the active.
Mm-hmm.
And in line 3, again, it's physical. It's literally in the room. We can feel it, we can see it, we can exchange it, we can both look at it and talk about it. There's something that is physically here around this revelation point.
And it's interesting too, because it's going to be a Mercury Kazemi moment where Mercury will be passing the sun right as that lunar eclipse finishes in apex. It's just like Mercury's like boom, crossing the sun.
And this line 3 in gate 1 is called the energy to sustain creative work in traditional keynote. And then in gate 2, line 3.
And that's one of the gates of the Penta.
Yeah, it is. So things that move us as a collective or as a group, energy that groups people together. And it's actually, when we're talking about the program or the background frequency or in the transits, it's actually the penta and the larger version of the penta, which is called the Wa. These transauric forms are where the conditioning hits the collective. It doesn't really hit us as individuals as much as it does when we get grouped into groups of 3 to 5 to 20 or more. That's when the conditioning gets crazy. That's when things really go whatever direction they're going to go. So keep that in mind, that on an individual level, this is an establishment of a new mutation of our direction. Mutation, adaptation, line 3. Direction, gate 2. Moon, North Node. Earth, Uranus. It's very much this Gaia energy, because Gaia is not just the physical earth and the dirt and the soil and the roots and the branches. She's an ascended being, Uranus, ascended mindset, ascended consciousness, I should say. So Uranus is imbuing, mutating the very ground we stand on and the consciousness of the earth itself with a new higher logos, a new higher direction, a new higher calling. But it's secret, because the way that Uranus is playing out in line 4 as opposed to line 3, the element of Uranus says, yes, I know I'm the leader in this situation, but I'm not the acknowledged leader. I'm the driver, but I may not be the owner of the car yet. Or I'm navigating for the person that's driving, but, it's not my vehicle. There's a sense of an informal recognition of leadership or direction, and that it's better that way. So in your individual direction, it's probably something about that is not public. Yeah, maybe the people in your close connections are sharing in this direction with you or are aware of this with you. But on a collective scale and your communal scale, it's not something to really talk too much about. That's a message that I don't want you to overthink, but remember and let it contemplate and trickle through as it's going to play out for you. It's not about caution necessarily as it is about intention. So yeah, Mars is in that gate of caution, which is called confession. So there's this sense of us just having to spill the beans in some other way of just, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with this job. I'm done with this income source. I'm done with, Taurian and Scorpionic themes of some kind. And it has to do a lot with the fact that by the time Neptune is in the first line of gate 36, by this time, it's very clear to us the nature of the crisis that we're experiencing. Up until this point, up until actually September 11th to the transit that we're in now until the 23rd of September, it's just been kind of hitting us as a collective what actually has happened to our bodies, to our emotions, to our spirit, whatever. And so by the time it's retrograded back to line 1, the foundational line, we can see to the essence, to the core level, what is the nature of the crisis that we've been in since March.
Right. And especially Jupiter and Neptune are back in Pisces once in our lives. Last time was 1856, both rulers of Pisces. And so it's interesting that Jupiter moves to the 25th gate from the 17th and brings us back to a monopole position instead of up in the Anja in the mind, which is interesting that Pisces has that last degree, which is the most highest spiritual degree in astrology, is in the monopole. And it is the one that it does make a channel to the ego center. Mm-hmm. And that's what's interesting to me. If we could just show this, Brian, because I think it's interesting when you show people in a 3D moment that it's more than just this lunar eclipse happening. But when you look at it from a different angle, it's Earth passing Uranus. So when you think of Earth the days before, when the solar eclipse happened on the 25th, like you see there's the new moon, and you can see that it's really this lunar eclipse that's not only just the last lunar eclipse of the year or the cycle, but it's also the moment when Earth is passing Uranus and activating and seeing it from the sun's point of view, and we are literally passing it, and we have just started a Mars retrograde where Earth is getting ready to pass Mars. So there's this Mars-Uranus moment, like you said, like I'm over it, I want to move on to something different. There's this huge calling, and then there's Mercury. The Kazemi means that Mercury's on the opposite side of the sun from Earth. It's not retrograde anymore. It's actually at its fastest moment. So it's like a huge moment for us where we are going to be much more clear and much more aware of what changes need to be made. Or if you're not in that clarity, or you're not really feeling the energy of that, it's time to really move on to the best energy that there can be and to get out of so much of what you're not truly are. And when you think of Jupiter and Neptune, right? So from an Earth point of view, when you look at it this way, like from an Earth, well, I had to back up. When you look from an Earth point of view, we've already seen the conjunction happen. But the fact that Jupiter's retrograding back because of Earth's position, that this is our last moment where we see these two for 13 years, but it's the last moment when we see these two for our lives in their natural home. They're the lords of that house. So this is the highest spiritual frequency we could literally get period.
Period.
And I do this on my deep astrology every week because I like to give people a different way to look at it. And especially I love how human design includes the earth, where astrology just looks at it from that, but Helio looks at the earth. And I feel that it's a very important moment for us as we look at Uranus on the horizon. There's the Pleiades star cluster that's in our future. Like, this is Uranus heading towards Sirius over these next, this next decade, which is where the ancients have pointed so much. There's so much that we are headed to as a collective in a space of where natural humanity truly from eons and eons truly exists. And so I think that it's the moment where we can turn the tide individually, and we'll all eventually find our way of how we all come together in that. But like you said earlier, we do have to find our own self in order to help others and to deal with all these things. And this is the moment where individually it might not feel maybe as collective as we might think. I think you said earlier in this, from the last one, that it's almost like we're able to see more clearly that more people are like us than we realize. And I think that with that solar eclipse prior and then this lunar eclipse happening, it's like having that knowledge in self and being in your true self and not your not self, you activate yourself into a higher frequency. You activate yourself into realizing that the apocalypse that you are penetrating is the one that is no longer serving you, that an apocalypse is a great thing. It's a turning of times. It's a turning of energy, and it's time to turn it over to this much higher frequency. Because when you look at it from a astrological geo point of view, to see Jupiter and Neptune back in Pisces in retrograde, this is crazy. I mean, the last time we saw these two was in 1856, and we saw these two conjunct in the end of March into April. So it's interesting that you brought that up. And then on top of it, this moon Uranus is this lunar eclipse is exactly on Uranus, and it's with the North Node, and it's in Taurus where it's exalted, where Venus is not happy here. And here's this South Node, Mercury, like not getting lost in the imagination of still holding on to the attachments in your emotional, mental, like obsessive, can't let go. When this is saying let go and break apart that stuff and release yourself into something much more greater. And even with the Mars retrograde, it is a time in our lives where we're going to finally say, mind, you are not going to lead the way like you have since 1943. Mm-hmm. Right? The idea that they're talking about the nukes all the time now.
Yeah.
The way that they're talking about how we're running on a world's mind that's from 1943. That's actually the deeper truth. And it's that time's going to be over at this lunar eclipse. It's gonna fall apart. It's gonna take a while, but it's not a long time. It's a 3-month eclipse or retrograde, but it's gonna be like, oh yeah. You're trying to run it that way, ain't gonna happen. I know everybody's all glistening about King Charles right now. This is where you're gonna see this motherfucker sucks horribly. You know what I mean? This is where it all just starts to go, and it might feel like chaotic. It is Uranian energy, and even having the solar eclipse prior is the unexpected. Well, in astrology, this lunar eclipse is on Uranus, which is the unexpected. So everywhere in all the systems, it's the unexpected. And I think that's a great thing. I'm kind of more excited for something different in life and opposed to the same mundane bullshit.
You can't predict it.
That's the best part, or it wouldn't be exciting or fun, or it wouldn't be unpredictable, or it wouldn't be exciting. Exciting is what Uranus is. I mean, our nerves can get excited in a positive way, or they can get excited in a nervous way. But I feel like it's like, if you're so nervous, it's because you're afraid that you don't have control. Especially, this is where Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces is about surrendering to the most epic, fucking beautiful, visionary quest of our lives. We will never see this ever again in our lives. We are blessed. We are the luckiest of the luckiest people to see the two rulers of Pisces be together. And we get this last moment here of an eclipse with it. We'll never see an eclipse in our life again with Jupiter and Neptune Pisces. So, it's very interesting though, when you really start looking at the energies that are building up. And I mean, I don't have to get too deep, but it's like, if I take you to in between these eclipses, and I take you to that October 25th one, we are seeing what is a very interesting aspect, which is when you take a look at Jupiter, okay, and actually even it's kind of interesting to see that we're going to see a semi-square there, but Jupiter on the build-up to the eclipse cycle that we're in now, as it's at 5 degrees today, and it's going to move down here to the beginning of the eclipse to the very 0 point of the chart, it will be in a semi-square to Uranus and Saturn, which are in their Saturn-Uranus square. This is a very hard aspect because it's definitely one that shatters the reality of what you expect things to happen or what you keep expecting life to be like. This is where the universe is having the very big energy. Uranus is liberation and Saturn is contraction. And so this is where there's going to be a battle for that. And Jupiter sitting in between both, being like, are you going to identify with maybe either? Why don't we actually find the best way possible of what's best for people, what's best for my own individual life, what's best for me to feel who I am, and then what my soul is. Like this Jupiter, the last time we saw it pass from Pisces to Aries and back into Pisces was in 2010. And it was with the planet Uranus. And right when it came back in, Uranus in 2011 is when we had Fukushima. And it's interesting that we're not going to have Uranus with this, but we are going to have Uranus in a semi-square. So it is bringing up like, what's happened with things like Fukushima? What's happened with these kind of things? And I do predict that there's going to be a lot of rattling and shaking on the global front, like Fukushima style, because of the fact that Jupiter is at these degrees where we did see Fukushima, we did see a Saturn opposition, and now we're seeing a Saturn square to Uranus, not opposing. So that means that this is also a 3/4 square to the Uranus-Saturn opposition, and then Jupiter still in the middle of this. So this is bringing back the beginning of the iPhone, the beginning of Facebook, the beginning of an app, or even going online on your phone, and the fuck show that it's causing us to change how it's all done and disconnect in different ways and get back to a physical, beautiful story in our lives and not the ones we're creating in our crazy minds and our crazy fucking control systems of what's trying to control us through media, Jupiter and Neptune that are coming back, right? To let these things go. The propaganda is extreme with Jupiter and Neptune. And so this is so important because it's when Mars retrogrades, boom, on Halloween, that Jupiter's back there and it's with it. This is where they're going to throw the biggest propaganda and for you not to buy it ever.
And that's going to be in the spleen center on Halloween. So it's going to be something about health, well-being, survival, and also intertribal relations, because the 44th gate that will be in play on Halloween is all about if someone's in your tribe or not, and being able to smell that on them biologically. And as you shared with me, that really opened my eyes to a lot, that, the smell, that the scent that even the pheromones that we smell off each other that attracts us or repels us is a immunological profile.
Right.
So if someone has a really strong smell that you like, it's because they have the kind of immune system that's like complementary to the kind of immune system you have. To
keeping the species going.
Right, because we have to have those complementary combinations. So in this propaganda, it might be a division between those that have an innately organic immune system and those that don't. What could that be?
Right, especially that they've loaded themselves up with a plan of 170 doses of one tested only on mice. They've never done already it's almost like a weird psyop, because if you think about the propaganda, it's making people be like, well, okay, this one was on mice. So was that one on humans? Okay, yeah, a very small control group, not enough time. And it's making it okay for it being like really not tested. And now it's making it to where we're not even testing it on humans.
We're not even going to bother.
We're not even bother. And people are like, oh, whatever. And nobody's running the red alerts. And like, that's where, you know, you have to like see, like it was very, and it just keeps happening. But just the other day, the stock market crashed to 1,300 points. And it was also at the same time that Biden did his Inflationary Reduction Act celebration with Nancy Pelosi. And right as they're doing it, all the networks go straight to breaking alert. The inflation numbers for August had come out, and inflation has skyrocketed more, but not in fuel and gas because he's using the petroleum reserves. But the stock market crashed, the worst that it has in years. And it's brought it back down to the exact level of where he took the president. So all the gains have been gone in a year and a half. So it's like the idea that his Inflationary Reduction Act is doing great things. He's celebrating something. It reminds you of the 12 line that's going to be coming, right? Like, you probably should wait till the inflation numbers come out instead of touting that you made an act that's going to reduce it when it's not doing that. It's making it worse. And that's been the weird irony, is that I know that a lot of people out there feel like we're not going to win. And I don't think you should come from whether we're going to win or lose. It's much more of a place of like, watch this hilarious show of it fall apart. They are not going to have the control unless you give it to them, unless you fall for it, unless you make your monopole their monopole.
Exactly. It's really interesting to read the keynotes for this day of Halloween, where Mars goes retrograde in the gate of the prophet. That's where Mars will be. But we also have Venus close to the sun in gate 44. Conditions. A mastery of the collective that can establish restrictive conditions for inferior components, and with the ability to enforce them. An alertness to patterns that can lead to mastery of the collective. But Venus is here, so it's in detriment. An attractive nature that will interact with inferior forces and will fail to apply restrictions, resulting in a risk to continued harmony. The failure of the instinct out of the need for harmony. So also, I wrote on this page earlier, before I even looked at this, time is of the essence.
Well, a lot of people in the chat are bringing up financial, which I think is an interesting point when you bring up that time of the essence. And I mean, one thing is like, money's money, and I know maybe we feel we need it and all that, especially in across the planning, right? Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things where I know people are like, this is going to be the financial reset and all that stuff. What I think is going to be the most interesting is looking at the EU's chart, that it is literally the birthday, the solar return of the EU in the middle of a moon conjuncting Pluto and Capricorn, now direct, about to go into Aquarius, knowing it is a Mars retrograde. This is the worst chart for the EU. This is going to be where, in the flip of things, back in 1776 when Pluto was here, it was America, the 13 colonies leaving the British rule and declaring independence. Now, since America's done that, the financial collapse is going to be the EU, as it's going to it's going to all be inverted. It's going to be their collapse and their breaking apart of a whole huge part of it's a bigger the EU is created to compete against America and become bigger, and it did. And it was, and it ruled for a long time. I mean, America's very strong because of the US dollar being the crude oil, and that's how we trade commodities and so forth in US dollars. But the fact that we're going to see the breaking apart, and this is why you really trust your queenie so much. I mean, maybe if you're on her team, because the Brexit was all planned right before 2020, like right before, to get out. They knew it was going to happen. That this is all a psyop to get people, and it's going to be the EU that falls apart. And that's what happens, is when we see these falling apart in other parts of the world, it affects people. Do I think it'll be a complete change of a financial system in 1 week, 1 day, 1 month? I don't know, but I definitely know that things take time. Money takes time. and Taurus takes time, and Scorpio is transformation, but the Taurus energy takes time. It's not something that, and if they do try to do something like that, it'll fail miserably. But the idea is going to be that, you know, we are going to see the beginning of a country say, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not. We need to survive. I'm going to make the deal with Russia to get the gas. We're not going to be sitting here with wood. There's no more wood in the countries, and they're out there in the woods cutting wood themselves to stay alive for they're preparing, like you said, like the preparation for the winter. But there's going to be people that are going to be like, we're done. We're not going to do this NATO thing anymore. We're not going to do this EU thing. Same thing that happened with the Americans of the colonists of the colonies. It's all inverted, and it's all going to happen there. And that's where the eclipses, the energy is in that area. And so I know that Americans are worried, but really it's going to be the Europeans, and it's going to be the EU, and the UK already set themselves up. They prepared. The Americans are super prepared, even though they have their struggles, and so does the UK right now. But they have a lot more you know, I've said this for years, that it's almost like America and the UK are realizing, well, we are from the same place, right? There's a tribal. If we're talking about tribalism in the age of planning, this is where you'll see the tribalism come extreme, where you'll see that the UK and the US are like, hey, we're old homies. I know we had some family problems, but that's why you see America showing the Queen more than you see anything else right now, and showing the whole royal family. Like, what? Like, we're in America. If the founding fathers saw that, they would be like, "What the fuck are you guys doing?" Right? That the tribalism is going to get extreme, and the tribalism of the new European continent. It's not even a continent, but the area of all those countries is going to be a Wild West show. But it's going to be a beautiful show, I think, to see people start to stand up for themselves and be like, no, I'm not going for this plan. I don't even know what's happening over there. But things will be revealed, like, what, we were doing this, and really, he said, right now, the whole story of Sixth Planet Retrograde is Ukraine's winning the war out of nowhere. And like, just trust Zelensky. He's there, and he's taking his little pictures. We just took this little town. And it's crazy because they're using polling from back in April and June of how Ukrainians feel they're going to win the war. So they're putting that up like Ukrainians feel they're going to win the war, but the polling's from June. It's like all these little psyops are going on to reel people in the monopole of, oh yeah, but you're going to see the breaking apart. You're going to see it. This is it. This unfortunately, if to prepare in Europe, you don't be scared, but definitely be prepared for watching countries say, I'm no longer going to use that euro, because what breaks apart is the euro. It's a financial aspect. That's the plan. And that's the plan by the US. That's the plan by the UK. It's the plan by China. It's the plan by Russia. And it's a plan by Ukraine. It's not about Russia, Ukraine. It's about all the dominant tribes that want to win at the end of the plan. It's a game Risk. And Europe was the fool through the whole thing. But it was also the weird karma of trying to build a European Union based off greed and desire, and to outwin people through monetary of Scorpio with the Mercury retrograde and the Mars-Pluto conjunction of like, we're going to fucking, yeah. And that's what you get, is the backlash now of it with all this Taurus. So I think that it's going to be we're going to see a world that's one-sided, propagandized, trying to calm the truth down and not have it be seen, while we're all seeing the truth with our own eyes, with our own senses, with our own feelings. And we have to trust in that and not follow what's going to be the false story. It's going to be the biggest false story to try to cover up what's really happening. And they've already got it all set up. So people are going to have to, I think, if there was anything to prepare for, it'd be like, start feeling into how we all can connect even outside of social media and all these different places, because they're going to be restricting those things deeply. It's going to be the weirdest feeling of our lives, but it will be the best of being like, I can feel my friend in the UK, I can feel my friend in Hungary going through it, and finding alternative routes. Uranus is alternative ways of communication too, right? Finding alternative places to meet and to gather and to talk and to share information between peer to peer. That's really what the end of the tribal, I guess you could say, planning would be on a positive, is the people at this moment where we have the technology, where we have the ability to share at these last moments, and trusting the peer to peer and no third connection between, you know, which are these social media giants and all these things that don't allow you to say what you want or hear what you want to say or anything, because they are you can already see what's happening right now.
I'm seeing it as you're speaking. See the whole story.
And they can't use the old one. They can't use the old one, but they'll have it at the right moment. It's almost like it's going weird with finances, and then it's going weird with the war, and then boom, COVID. You know, it's like they throw it in when somebody's already kind of sensitive enough and kind of not in monopole. They're not in their monopole. And then, oh no, I must do this now. You know, it's just like, that's how they do it now, is they're going to slide in other slides and then throw in that slide that you've seen before. That is the one that is what they're trying to do, and use all these other things while at the same time trying. I mean, if really it is true, which I am 100% on board, the end of the cross of planning is going to be a free-for-all for people that are going to try to achieve their position with a knowing that it is falling apart. They know.
Yeah. It's a liquidation sale of the cross of planning. So grab your stuff. Well, it's probably going to be more like Walmart looting, but like on a global governmental scale.
I was going to say Vatican looting. I mean, if you think the Vatican saying by the end of September, all the churches, all the people, and they had so much scandals that they had to clean out the bank. Now they're saying that's the reason why. Come back now. It's scandal free now. Right? And they've been losing money and all that, but there is the Swiss guard that guards all that. There's some really weird things that go on with the Vatican, and I feel that when you're at the end of cross of planning, if you really look deep into the beginning of it, it was always the Catholic Church behind a lot of the plans of the controlling of what could be said by alchemists, what could be said
the narrative,
by
the whole world.
The whole world. So it all leads to that place, and it's all going to lead to that place. Even with the idea of the EU breaking apart, they don't care. They love it. It'll mean more people going to their bank. And they already have a lot of euros, but they'll say, we'll convert it into, you want to be a Catholic again? We got Pope money. We got Pope crypto.
Catholic conversion bonus.
We got Pope crypto.
Pope coin.
Pope coin. There's these guys I follow on Instagram. They're called Jizz Coin. And they're like all about guys who haven't had the injection. And they're like, this is going to be the most valuable thing. And they just make these hilarious videos like, you should be invested in that Jizz Coin right now. It's hilarious. I think it's hilarious. They don't have a lot of followers, and I follow them. And I'm like, it's just the most cool, fun thing, because they're just living in their happiness, and they're so satisfied. And it satisfies me because it's so hilarious. Because, like, really, like, I think where we're going in that Sleeping Phoenix, it's like the values of things are going to be things like that. That might be the big shock for people, is like, it's not your house. It's not your car. It's not your clothes. It'll be beautiful, natural things of what you contribute in yourself, that you know within yourself, or what you have, or what we're going to be re-gauging all values through these processes. I mean, think of celebrities. I was, right before we did our reel, I follow this PR agent. She put up a reel of like, I don't even know the celebrity, right? And she was at obviously the red carpet event, and she's like, look who showed up, and then put this music on it, and it's just like, and I'm like looking at all the people, and I'm just like, everybody around, the photographers and everybody else just sitting around like this. Like, you know what I mean? And then even the person who's like on the red carpet is just kind of like, and it's just like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's not a value anymore. And it really never was. It was a weird
ritual.
It was a weird ritual of planning to plan people's way of what to give them more power, just like how the queen and the monarchy does.
Yeah.
Creates false idols. So.
It's actually all like ancient Babylonian and Sumerian culture, just rehashed and redressed and repackaged and resold. And it's all fake. It was never real. It just seems like it's real because it's been done so many times over and over again that it's like, oh yeah, that's how it's done. But yeah, anyway.
Is there, if we're going to end this, I just want to ask one human design question. Is there a gate that is representative of loops and patterns and having to get over them? Kind of like how Pisces.
The gate we're in tonight, gate 47.
Really?
Mm-hmm. We're in the 6th line, so we're figuring out how to get out of the loop in this conversation.
That's so weird that was my last.
Yep, we're
question.
In
I felt like
last tippy tip of gate 47, line 6. Which shout out to Jovian Archive, love you guys. Let's look at genetic matrix actually. So where are we at? Come on. Slow. That's the thing about Jovian, it's quick. Anyway, so 47 line 6. Up here in the ajna, connecting to the crown, gate 64. This is abstract, meaning that it's not looking at just one single pointed focus. It's trying to process all the information at once. There's no order to it. So in doing that, it will think about the same thing again and again and again and again and again, just to hopefully maybe think about it in a slightly different way, slightly different angle, slightly different perspective, to free itself from the uncertainty of not knowing something, not being clear on something.
Gosh, that's so Virgo.
And both of these are Virgo, 64 and 47
yeah,
are
that's
Virgo.
so crazy.
And so 47 though is it's like the aperture almost in the ajna that can finally grab, the one screenshot, the one frame that's actually different from all the loops that have been run through already, and say, oh, we have a difference in the pattern here. This is the one we can go with now for our new sense of certainty. And then we drop that down into the 11 and say, look, this is the solution to the pattern. This is what we didn't see before. This frees us from our old perspective. And the 56, which is your sun, where we tell the world, look at this thing. Look, it can free you. It can either distract you from your uncertainty, cross the distraction, or it can liberate you from oppression. And that's what gate 47 is. Oppressed by your thoughts or not. Liberated by your thoughts.
And it's weird because as we're speaking, it's starting its opposition to Neptune in Pisces. So you'd think Pisces being the loop, but it's almost like Neptune might be the one serving as the awareness of that the information is not so mental, but it's spiritual, and it's listening and guiding you to get out of it and get your mind out of it.
Yeah, I've recently been channeling the title of Neptune. Oh, sorry for showing my chart, everyone, as the Great Dissolver.
It's a nice chart, bro. Thanks. Look at that monopole fucking power.
I think Neptune is the Great Dissolver now. Especially in Pisces, it's like digesting, dissolving, just like diluting in a good way all of the intensity, all of the focus, all of the like attachment to things. And that is a path to liberation.
Yeah, it's when the pinks start to turn to the ultraviolet when you start getting to these last degrees of Pisces, right? It's starting to get to that where it's fresh, it's fresh spirit, like, you know, it's fresh spirit. It's the Saint Germain of all vibrations, which does pull you out of all that. Like, it's kind of crazy though, because it kind of is kind of almost like a Oz effect, but a divine Oz effect, like the opposite of Oz, like the one that pulls you
it's like
out of the
returning
illusion,
it all back to its original state.
Or it sucks, or there's an alternate Oz that people keep running the fucking thought pattern in that 47 gate and just keep stuck in a, it's almost like it's inner mental chaos and owning a thought pattern that just won't get out of its, it doesn't allow itself to step outside for a second and go, oh wait, it's like stepping outside to get a fresh thing of air. That reminds me of, like, stop thinking for a second and maybe just step outside and get some air and have a talk about it. We used to do that back in 2019. Remember, we used to all go back there with Jax and everybody, and it was like, then we'd all come back in, you know. It's like, those are the beautiful things in life that get you out of those places. And I feel like you're right. Neptune's helping us dissolving it back to, like, talk to me about something else. Like, talk to me about some whatever.
Right. Enough of these eclipses and all this intensity and all this like gloom and doom. Like, let's have some fun.
That's you know what? If there's any time to have more fun in the most wild time of all times, it'd be now. That's what's the best part about it. You can't be afraid. And you know what? Scorpio likes a little bit of that edge and fear anyways to make it good. Like, that's what's beautiful about the sacral and the sexual energy. There's something about the edge that's fucking great. Like, without the edge, it would be hell.
Be kind of boring.
Oh yeah, I mean, it would. Yeah, poor raves.
Well, whole different ball game.
Yeah, I guess. Talk about like having a little, like, you know.
There's a clear dividing line of where you want it to be incarnated, like the fun or the rave.
Right, but I'm saying that the raves, because we won't really get it fully, might have a little quirk to it that we don't know about that actually is way more.
I hope so. Way
more to them, you know. I don't know.
So many possibilities
like
coming to mind.
Alien fingers going, oh my God, but not touching. Kind of like a, you don't, all three of them, like.
Isn't that in a movie where they have
it's
dick finger?
I don't know. It kind of reminds me of like Mars Attacks. How they put, they just have their weird brains and they're obsessed with getting the girl and cutting her head off and putting it on the dog body and like,
yeah.
You know, like they like love it and they're like, oh, and then they got the Playboys and like, you know, like, so Mars. It's so weird.
That's like, those things are so real to me that they actually make me cringe.
And the fact that Tim Burton did it too, it's like, guy has like a lot of weird stuff that you go deep down that rabbit hole. It's like he's playing with the other side that we don't play with.
It's Hollywood.
And I guess there's the last thing, which I think is interesting, is Ukraine is saying right now, there's so many UFOs around Kiev and around the Ukraine right now. And
the UFO is going to leak the footage of what's actually going on. And they're like, look, nothing's even happening. It's all like staged.
Yeah, I just think it's, you know, there's a lot that maybe that Mars retrograde at the 12th gate that you showed tonight, of like more than just knowing when to say something and not, is also activating your throat chakra to taking on the story and just buying it right away, like kind of like manifesting, because it's Mars, like kind of like in the mind, like, oh yeah, that's what it is. Like, kind of being like,
In Gene Keys, the shadow of Gate 12 is vanity. It's about being so obsessed with who we think we are that we're easily deceived into a whole like wrong ideal. And it comes through discrimination, like in the positive sense, being discerning, that we get to speak purely from our heart.
which is true beauty, beautiful instead of vanity. Vanity is the opposite of beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Vanity is taking credit for God's creation as if it's
Yeah.
your own.
And it's very Luciferian.
Point blank.
Well, that was a great show.
It was.
And it's kind of crazy to think how fast this is coming. But in the moment of 6 planets retrograde, it kind of is feeling like
We're outside of time.
we're outside of time, and it almost feels like time's going backwards. Like, is it really still summer? It is. Wait, what? Is it fall? I don't know. When is it? And then people down in Australia and South Africa and South America are like, it's still winter? Is it spring yet? You know, like there's this whole like, it's all very, it's going to be so impactful what's coming that it's interesting to see it from such a retrograded kind of outside
Mm-hmm.
perspective of it all in this moment. Well, join us on High Vibe, and make sure that you follow Dylan at humandesignmaven on his Instagram or his website, which we have those links down below. And we might not see you for a couple weeks, right?
Adventure time.
Dylan will be on an adventure, but maybe we'll be able to do like a quick 20-minute something down. Who knows? We'll just respond.
Yeah, we got this.
So, love you all very much.
Love you all.
We'll see you all soon.